Welcome to the real journey of the entrepreneur. Well, hello there. It is so awesome to see you. Thank you for joining this evening for another episode of the real journey of the entrepreneur. My name is Anita Pierce, and I'm your host and producer of the real journey of the entrepreneur. This is a podcast that focuses on a wide range of topics, specifically focused and targeted for entrepreneurs. We've had a number of wonderful individuals who have lent their experience, conversation. We've done 12 episodes that focus on a wide range of topics, one including access to capital, transitioning from the corporate life to working as a full-time entrepreneur, what it really means to connect with other business owners, and more. And so this specific platform focuses on the opportunities to be able to connect everyday entrepreneurs. Because what we've recognized that when you take on the journey of entrepreneurship, it is a really an amazing and dope and challenging experience. However, it is met with real life things that happen along the way. I am Anita Pierce, and I am the business owner of 11375. We are a business consultancy that was founded in 2015. However, we became a real business. As we've talked about, there's a starting point, and also when you become really certified as a real business in 2017. We provide foundational education to small businesses. And one of the benefits of working with our organization is that we close the learning gap. We support nonprofits, other governmental agencies, and we also facilitate socially relevant work that promotes overall wellness in the areas of finance, economics, mental wellness, and economic and civic engagement. And all combining all of our services with the primary focus of making sure that we give back to all of our communities in which we are servicing. The business is certified with New York State and also New York City as a MWBE. And I am really excited to discuss with another dynamic entrepreneur. I had a chance to connect with our guests as a result of us participating on monthly MWBE calls with Senator Sanders' office. And so oftentimes when we're thinking about how do we connect really with other entrepreneurs, sometimes it is really about, jumping in and also trying and meeting and taking risks by participating in meetings, going to networking events, and just taking risks, because you never know how you can meet new individuals, how you can establish new business, and how you can just leverage, the skill set of working with others. So I am super excited to present to some and reintroduce to most Miss Kyana Beckles. Ms. Beckles is the CEO of Leverage Assessments. Kyana has a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology from the University of Maryland. She is certified. She is a certified credentialing specialist with the Institute of Credentialing Excellence. I actually have to find out what that means. So I'm glad I'm rereading the bio, because there's a lot that's always included within bios, and it's always fascinating to learn more specifically about how that helps them within business. So I'm going to ask that question. Also has 10 plus years of consulting with organizations and business development, restructuring, downsizing, transformative leadership, assessment, and entry-level promotions, etc. Kyana is also an alum of the Goldman Sachs 10K Small Business Program. And so I am going to pause and bring on my guest for this episode as we unpack what first generational entrepreneurship looks like and the importance of cultivating relationships. So I welcome, hi Kyana. What a mouthful, right? I know you're probably like, she just talking. Let's get this interview over with. But let me just tell you how look, first of all, shout out to the amazing smile. Let's shout that out first and foremost, because as entrepreneurs, we don't want to show up and mean mugging everybody. So when you got an amazing smile, I like to shout that out. So hello. I cannot hear you. Nope, it's probably your Bluetooth. And while we are getting through some of the normal technical difficulties that happen while we are in this space, so this is not abnormal. I am going to just mention some of the opportunities that are in it that actually are current for small businesses, as this is a focus on small businesses. We have a grant that is with the New York State Small Business Recovery that is actually open and available to small businesses. There are a number of requirements that you are responsible for. So please be sure to check out the NYSSmallBusinessRecovery.com, as there are active small business grants that are available that you can apply for. Again, this is about, making sure we share information to our community. Wanted to also plug as well the New York City Small Resource Network. They have one-on-one small business support. You can sign up to receive grants for websites, grants for any type of small business needs. So make sure that you are taking a full advantage of all that is accessible and that is free. So let's just check again with our guest. Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Microphone check 1 2 1 2. We're back. I hear you.
Yes. Awesome.
The smile is still amazing. So I always like to, I don't care what anyone says. When you have someone that has a very bright and beautiful smile, you shout them out. It's welcoming, particularly if we have hard days.
Yes, I appreciate you so much. And certainly I use the smile to get through every moment. I smile through the laughter, through the pain, through the anxiety, just through every single moment. I'm glad that you shouted out the small business recovery grants, because there is money out there to get right now. In addition to the grants, there's more money coming out in the EIDL. There are a ton of resources out there. So if you do have a business advisor or CDFI or a bank, a good relationship with the bank, please do reach out to them to try and get some more of that money. And it's cheap.
And you hear it. We are all about promoting, support in ways in which small businesses that look like us to have access to real capital. So before we jump into this wonderful conversation, just tell us a little bit more meat about what's not in the bio. And also, what is a credentialing certified specialist? Like, what's that about? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, when you're doing a bio, you're sort of trying to figure out what to get in there. And I can imagine that as I get older, there'll be more stuff to pick from, and maybe I'll just add less. Because it's like, it just gets to be so much. You start to amass such a wealth. But yeah, my background is in test development. And so if you've ever applied for a job and you had to take a test, that's what I do. I'm the person behind the scenes that is writing the test questions, doing the test maintenance on the items, making sure that the test is functioning properly, and making sure that it is compliant with, government, federal guidelines, and that sort of thing.
Wow. That is fascinating.
It is.
Wow.
It is. We're certainly not celebrities. We're kind kind of more of the people in the closet that you never see or hear from. But I felt it was important to be in this field because the roots of testing really go in our country, really go back to the Civil Rights Act and go back to African Americans having fair access to government jobs. And so we are getting tested. We are the primary group that's getting tested, but we are generally not the test developers. So it's important for more of us to be in the ownership and test development space, so that we can be a part of that narrative.
Wow. I don't want to say I'm impressed, but wow. This is a first. So can I get your autograph after this?
We're definitely a small group. It's maybe like, in terms of like other, Black people in the psychometric space, it is kind of like a very niche club. And then if you drill down to those of us who are in the entrepreneur space, it's an even more niche club. So if you are in that club and you're seeing this broadcast, please do hit me up because, we're always looking to connect with more like-minded folks and just kick ideas back and forth and come up with innovative things.
That's all I can say is wow. I still want your autograph. So yes. What else can you tell us a little bit more about like where you're from, like what, and then we could launch into like all the other goodies because your background is obviously super impressive, but what don't we know that's in the bio?
I'm from New York City, born and raised, from the Bronx, currently living in Harlem. I am third generation NYC. My, when you're from New York, people always ask you like, where are you really from? And I'm like, no, we're really, really American. We've done a little bit of like the ancestry search, and some of our records go back to like the 1600s, being documented in the census. On both sides, I've got family members that go back to plantations in Florida and Georgia. So both my last names come from plantations. Yeah. I came into the advocacy and diversity space very, very naturally and by my birth rate.
So nobody can tell you anything that you don't belong. So let's talk about how did you jump into entrepreneurship?
I found that when you are creative, smart, and very hardworking, that you kind of give your supervisors a reverse incentive, right? It kind of incentivizes them to keep you underneath them because you're producing the work to make them look good, right? So there's kind of a reverse incentive to get promotions if you're really hardworking and you're doing a great job. So I think I just kind of caught on to that. And I think I also started to see the pattern of being a woman and being Black that stereotypically I might be seen more as the assistant. And the opportunities for promotion might not be readily available as a result, just because people start to think of you more as the person who helps, not the person that's in the leadership position. So I also had some experiences that made me feel like I just needed to have more control over my life. And I think that entrepreneurship will do that for you when you're working for someone else, and you have to take off because of family, or you have to do something that's meaningful for you. You aren't always given that consideration if you can't control your own schedule. So, I remember being in the corporate workforce and like missing funerals, or like missing hospitalizations and just feeling like I should have more control over my life to be able to prioritize my family and the needs of the folks in my community.
That is so. You know what? I've done a few interviews, but to have it spoken as to their reason why, from the perspective of like you're missing out on life by working for someone else, is that's deep. That's deep.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to work just as hard as an entrepreneur, but you have more control and you're the one that reaps the benefits, right? So it's like, if I'm going to work day in and day out, I might as well be the one to share in the successes.
And so part of this is when you started leverage.
Yeah. So I started
That
leverage. Yeah. So I come out of I come out of grad school and I'm trying to decide whether to go back into the workforce or whether to try and like work for somebody. And I just saw myself applying for jobs and trying to go through these filters and just not seeing myself fit into these molds of these job descriptions. And I start realizing like, I'm just going to need to step out and do my own thing. So I launched, now I had been independent consulting since I finished undergrad. I finished, I'm no stranger to recessions. I finished my undergrad degree in 2008.
Wow.
So everything was on hiring freeze. Nobody was hiring. So I started independent consulting because I didn't necessarily want to work at McDonald's. No shade on McDonald's, but you know, if you finish undergrad with 2 degrees and you've paid for all that knowledge, you kind of want to be working in your field. So I started working as an independent consultant, helping businesses do more with less. I was sort of the downsizing consultant, and that allowed me to make a living. I did that for a couple of years until I started seeing these commercials for IBM Analytics on TV. I started realizing that, you know, I needed to understand more about data science in order to go further. So I went back, I started looking for degree programs, and I found the master's in industrial organizational psychology. Went back for my degree program, and then I had to, again, make another decision point, and I decided that I wanted to go for a company this time. Rather than independent consulting, I was going to like try to make an entity out of a hustle. So by the time I actually started the company, I had been independent consulting for a number of years. But this second launch was kind of the, you know, this was kind of putting everything behind, you know, everything you have behind it when you're like, okay, I'm really going to do it this time. And in order to do that, you gotta learn a lot of stuff. But you know, I was committed to do it. Again, you know, when you make the comparison between the common workday nowadays, where if you're working for somebody else, they expect you to work. You know, the place where I was working at, you're working sometimes Saturdays and Sundays. You're working until night. You're working, you know, 12 or 18 hours. So when you think about the workload, what's the difference between doing that for somebody else and doing that for yourself? So when I got to that decision point, it was like, I know, you have the work ethic, you know, so why not do it in a space where you can actually control and direct the narrative?
I see. I couldn't agree with you more. And so when you took that jump and that leap of faith to bet on yourself, right? What was your first year startup cost? What did that look like for you? Once you decided that you wanted to be a formalized business entity, what did that look like for you, your cost first year?
My first year, I had $1,000. And I used that $1,000 to do whatever I had to do, you know, register the entity, start hustling and finding little gigs. And I basically been bootstrapping ever since until I got my first like actual loan, and started building up credit history, which maybe was a couple of years ago. But I've been bootstrapping for the first 2-3 years of the business.
Now, for those that don't know what bootstrapping is, could you elaborate what that is for those who may not know what that meaning is?
It's when you don't necessarily have the resources and the funding like the big boys do, and you essentially take every dollar that you earn and you convert it into $2, and then you invest the other dollar or 50 cents into growth. And you basically just chug along like that until you can figure out how to double it, triple it in order to grow.
And so you for most real entrepreneurs that look like us, that's generally how we started.
We do
Like,
a lot of it. We do a lot of it
yeah,
because,
yeah.
when you start the larger companies, a lot of these folks, they start with their friends. Everything starts with a friends and family raise, right? Before you can access financing from the big banks or from big investors, they want to see that you've done a friends and family raise first. And if you don't have the network to really do that raise in your inner circle, people who are not in your circle are going to be very hesitant to, drop more money on you, generally because they feel like, well, if the people who are around you don't trust you to invest in you, why should I trust you to invest in you? But, for many of us, it's not that our friends and family don't trust us to invest in us. It's just that they don't necessarily have the capital or the bandwidth to invest in us. If I marched around to every family member that I have, I could certainly get $20 from each one. But, is that going to get me any farther than I am today? Maybe not that much. So I decided to go the bootstrapping route because I didn't necessarily have the capital, the resources and capital that I would have needed to raise funds in alternative ways.
And I also want to add is that I myself, I can think back to, like, my grandmother used to sell Avon. Like, I didn't know that she was kind of like an entrepreneur. But I understand that now versus, what I'm doing now. But a lot of times our family members may not really understand what we're doing, and they don't really understand how to support what it is that we're doing, whether financially, whether other ways. So that may pose another challenge early in the beginning until they start seeing like either checks or results. That's how it is in my household. Until
all day.
So I'm like, it's
yes,
strange. It's
yeah,
so
they want to
strange.
know what you're doing, and they think that you are sleeping until noon because you have no job, and they think that you are any job applications, and they want to see a steady paycheck, and they would almost as soon rather you go and apply to that grocery store downstairs than be up there calling yourself some kind of an entrepreneur. And certainly for my family, for my parents' generation, having an education was the end all be all, right? Mm-hmm. And for the generation before that, they didn't have access to education. So having access to an education and the ability to get a job was almost the gold standard, right? For certainly folks in the Black community. And then there were only certain professions that we could really go into. Like, you'll notice that we're still in service positions. Many of the folks that I know in my parents' generation were either in education or in nursing in the medical field, because there were only certain professions that we were allowed into. So now that you can almost go to any profession that you want, for you to be like, oh no, I don't want a job, I'm gonna start my own business. Your parents think you're bonkers. You're absolutely nuts. And they will continue, for the first couple of years of entrepreneurship. For me, it was like for the first like 8 to 10 years of independent consulting, they will continue to tell you to get a job. And they will continue to like coo over the fact that you don't have a job. And they will continue to like mourn the fact that you don't have a regular paycheck, even if you're not asking them for money. And in my case, it was, the part that was funny for me was like, what do you think I'm doing? I haven't called you for any money. I pay my own rent. You know what I mean? I pay my own groceries. So like, what is it that you think I'm doing down here? It wasn't until, and I certainly used my family in the process of bootstrapping, just like everybody else does. But it wasn't until I could actually like pay them for projects, and until they could see that I actually got my first city contract, that my family started to feel that there started to be sort of a tide where they was like, she has a company. There was a transition from like, she doesn't have a job yet to, she's a business owner,
So
By the same token.
I got plenty of jokes. My husband, so I'm married, and I would, before the pandemic, I would have to go, to business meeting. I'll be like, listen, you got to watch kid, and I got to go to, I'm dressed like, I get out of the t-shirt or whatever I was looking like to the suit, the corporate life, the financial services look, and the arguments, Lord have mercy. So that's
why I said my hat's off to you, because I know once you said there was a 2-year-old in the back, I said, oh girl.
The process of explaining why you wearing that, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I'm going to this is normal. Like, that was so normal in my life. You go to networking events, you meet folks, and that was normal. That's not his background. So to be able to explain in the most cleanest way that you can explain that you're not doing anything appropriate, to your relationship, to that this is how you are generating business, took a process. So this is what entrepreneurship looks like. And a lot of times, it's hard to articulate, to someone who may not either have or share your vision right at the moment, right? But that this is what feels good in your gut and soul, that you just don't want to let it go. I'm totally in. I'm sold in.
But I'll say that even though we refer to ourselves as first generation entrepreneurs, entrepreneurship has existed in the Black community since we got to this country, right? Because we didn't have access to the job market. So what do you think we were doing? We were owning our own businesses, at whatever size they were, and we were operating in and out of collectives, which is, we have an amazing history of working with each other and resource sharing in order to, maintain and build wealth together. But my parents, certainly as a result of legislation and all the changes that were happening, my parents were a beneficiary of, for instance, like affirmative action quotas, where they were going to Ivy League schools because they just needed Black applicants. But if you go a few generations before that, my great grandmother apparently owned and operated a cafe. So she was an entrepreneur. Like, we have entrepreneurs in the history of the family. It's just that the thought was like, oh no, we're stepping up because now we can get these jobs and we can go to school. And I think that the cachet of entrepreneurship got lost in all of that. But we've been in this game for a long time.
A very, very long time. Very long time. And to your point, it is a part of our DNA, and looking to continue that for future generations, because this is one of the really good ways as to how you can create generational wealth that we're now learning. That. So I want to dig a little bit deeper, right? So you have, actually a couple of businesses, not just one. So you would be considered a serial entrepreneur. How do you manage that?
Maybe I don't, but well, what I learned is that there's power in the collaboration. That's one thing that I learned. My first and oldest, and my companies are my only children. I'm childless aside from these companies. So these companies are my babies. My oldest daughter is Leverage Assessment. She's in her 5th year. And then I have 2 pandemic babies, the Black Government Contracting Club and Community Policing Strategies. And what I've learned from raising Leverage was that doing it all by yourself is, first of all, not always possible. It'll slow you down. And it also means that you're limited to whatever resources are within your immediate reach. Whereas if you work together collaboratively with other folks, that you can grow and scale more quickly and have more of a resource network to start with. So my other companies are co-owned. I have a co-founder with the Black Government Contracting Club, Terrell Brown, who perhaps you will meet at some point. And there are 6 Community Policing Strategies has 6 owners. And it's the closest that I've gotten to a cooperative model, which I've been studying for a very long time. But especially when it came to, these conversations that we've been having around diversity and equity, and particularly in the police reform space, it felt like the cooperative model was most appropriate because it is the ultimate form of distribution of wealth, right? If we're saying that many of the problems in our communities are socioeconomic, aside from whatever happens with the police, as long as people are poor and impoverished and cannot, control their own narrative, they'll continue to have those issues. So the closest that we can really get to a solution is, using contracts, directly using police reform contracts to solve issues in our own community and distributing the wealth directly from the contracting.
So I don't want to ignore your last statement, but it was something that you said that you started 2 businesses during the pandemic. 2. not like one in a possible, right? But 2, right?
Yes!
So if anybody who plays spades know that one in a possible, like
I had to get my preacher rag out for that one. Yes. OMG. Yes. I think, once you sort of have a model and a template for how to start a business, it gets easier each time. And then you start to be sort of a professional business starter upper, right? Whereas when you're doing it the first time, you're like, you're kind of like a blind sailor and you're seasick and you're trying to figure out what the hell you're doing. And then by the second time, you've got a map, you've learned how to read the stars, and you know how to go to where you want to go. And so it gets easier. But as exciting as startups are, if you're further in your other businesses, it can be easy to forget how much work having a startup is. And I think that I kind of got lost in the work. But the other piece is that my professional expertise and what Leverage does, we do, some of the products that we have serve public safety and police. And so in seeing everything that was unfolding over the summer, it became clear that there was going to be a much larger demand and much more demand for those types of products. And so rather than expanding out the scope of Leverage, I went by the way of creating a separate specialized entity to sort of handle that overflow so that Leverage could continue to specialize just in like the testing stuff.
And so what's so amazing, I mean, we're still in the midst of the pandemic, so I don't want to, diminish, reduce anything. But one of the things that I'm finding is that if you know how to solve problems in the midst of chaos, then there's opportunity for you. And so I salute you, because it takes a lot of courage to be able to go through all this crazy. I look at 2020 and I'm like, that's all I could go is, right? And see that there are a number of businesses that have actually started, grown, and really have done really well in spite of all that we have witnessed over the last year. And even though there are a number of challenges, there are a number of successes, and kudos to you for being one of those successes. That's really amazing. And so now that you have, you're a serial amazing entrepreneur, like what does your day-to-day look like? Because how many hours do you really spend behind the computer, or have you had the courage to go out and start to meet up, like I guess the new normal? Like what does that look like for you now?
Well, what the pandemic changed was that for any face-to-face like marketing or conferences or presentations that I needed to do, they got converted into a virtual format. So it actually made my day a lot more efficient if I could sort of manage, the other aspects of that, like the loneliness and the closing of the gym. I could actually capitalize on the fact that my presentations could be a lot more efficient. So that's what I've done. And then, thankfully I don't have a ton of other distractions. I don't have any children or anything like that. It's just me and the cat. And as I was saying to you before, I can give him away if I really need, if I really just need a space without any distractions at all. And I pretty much just get up in the morning. I do my exercise routine. Sometimes I do some intermittent fasting. Otherwise, I'll chop a salad, and I work for 4 to 5 hours, and then I have my break, and I have my meals, and I work again for another 4 to 5 hours, and then I have my break, and then I work again for another 4 to 5 hours. And that's pretty much it. I mean, working is my life, but I'm thankful that I really love what I do. I'm really passionate about what I do in all aspects. So, it's a blessing. What's the saying? If you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. I certainly can relate to that. And certainly, I feel like when I get to the phase where I'm in my legacy period and I'm looking back on what I've accomplished and what I've done, I'll be able to say that not only did I make a living for myself, but hopefully I impacted positively many other people, and was able to share my gifts and talents for good.
And so I appreciate your process. You um, highlighted some key points, which I hope that the audience will pay attention about how you take care of self in order to be able to produce. Like you exercise, you eat, relatively well, and also you take breaks, right? And so, for me, I'm listening and I'm saying that's important for an entrepreneur to do self-care and to carve out time for eating appropriately and also taking breaks, because I can think of times I have a very spunky almost 7-year-old. Sometimes I feel like she's my age, and I have to tell you, like, it took me a while to to really get some sort of normalcy for what entrepreneurship looks like. So you talk about the getting up and working out. I wasn't doing that for a while. And I can tell you, when I started just doing like little things like walking, it was probably the best thing that I did for myself. Walking and, making sure that I'm hydrated. And sometimes that requires that I get up when everybody is sleeping, and it may not make sense to anyone else, but when you have that time, some days I do like 4 o'clock, 4 to 6, when it's just me, and 4 to 6, and then but I can take a nap before the little person gets up for the day. And so that's what works for me now. Before, I used to not sleep well, and there are days that I still, that may happen, but it's more so. And I'm glad you're like confirming, the importance of setting up time specifically for yourself, so that you can do this work that you need to do. And so I wanted to just ask another question about, what is your philosophy on business collaborations?
So I am kind of a socialist, and I know that term has a negative connotation in today's world. But I really do believe that, investing in your neighbor is investing in yourself. So I think that the more that we can collaborate, the more that we can work together and share our resources together, the better we can make, not only a living for ourselves, but make the world better for our communities, our neighbors, and the next generation as well. I think business collaboration is a critical component, especially if you are starting a business with fewer or limited resources, right? Because now you can at least pile your skill sets together, or rub your 2 nickels together. Whatever you have, you have more of than you would have if you try to go it alone. There's also like the entrepreneur think, where it can be incredibly isolating. And if you're just sort of sitting in your house by yourself and you're the only entrepreneur in the house, you're going to get a lot of pushback. What you doing? Why you don't get a job? Why you going to that fancy networking event? Why you got to spend all this money on this suit? You could have just got some pants and a shirt, called it a day. You're going to be getting a lot of lip about why you're doing the stuff that you do. So collaborating with other entrepreneurs can help you feel more sane and, keep you in the game longer, which is ultimately, what you need to get your wins. Most people, I mean, if you quit, you can never win, right? And a lot of folks they quit before they see the gains.
That's so true. That is so true. So I'm going to start with wrap-up questions. So on your journey, what realistic tips can you offer to someone who wants to follow as a business consultant?
So I don't necessarily consider myself like the end all be all. I think it's important for people to find a scenario that works for them. Just like how you've organized your schedule based on your scenario and based on your parameters and what your body needs. I don't really believe in generalization. I believe in customization. So you have to find something that works for you, put your resource map together and figure out what it is that you have, and then figure out what it is that you need, and then figure out how to leverage what you have to go out and get what you need.
And so where can anyone who wants to utilize any of your services find you?
You can certainly find me on LinkedIn. And I do those posts myself. I mean, I'm sitting here in this living room day in and day out. I haven't moved from this living room in a year and a half. So you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. You can find me via email. You can find me on any one of my company websites. If you go to leverageassessments.com, I'm there. If you go to blackcontracts.org and you hit the join button, I'm certainly there on the Slack channel. If you go to communitypolicingstrategies.com, I'm there too. So I'm everywhere. I'm actually omnipotent. You can pretty much you can pretty much find me anywhere.
Anywhere.
Yes.
All right. This is exciting. So before we close, I always like to do, the additional fun stuff, the one word answers, the rapid fire. What's your favorite borough?
The Bronx.
Why not? Why not? Because we always say Brooklyn, so why not rep where you from? What do you do in your downtime?
Sleep.
Pizzas or burgers? I know that's right. That sleep is always some good sleep. Pizzas or burgers?
I'm vegan, so either one without the meat.
That works for me. Smoothies or ice cream?
I do have a veggie ice cream that is very delicious. It's Oatly. It's a newer brand, and I love it.
Okay, hashtag. It is good either way. Good. In 3 years, what would you like to see change within your community?
I would like to see economic equality.
And the legacy that you would like to leave for your family?
A trust.
See? And no more final thoughts?
I'm always here, willing to share, willing to collaborate. So, hit me up.
And as you can see, we have all of Kyana's information that's scrolling down across the platform. Please make sure that you support all of the efforts that are happening with all small businesses. And so I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join me. This was wonderful. And I look forward to having you on again to be able to, just share if you have any updates with the club that you're working with, and to connect any additional resources for MWBEs within the state. Would love to have you back on to support. So thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. We're actually just launching our first micro accelerator program for Black businesses to pursue opportunities that are coming down, particularly in the IT spend portion of the infrastructure bill. there's way more of that to come, and I'd love to share all of that with you. I appreciate you having me here and creating this platform for us to share, because, as you know, marketing and getting the word out is so critical. And I'm happy to see you in this journey, in this entrepreneur journey with us. And I'm excited about doing more stuff together, Anita.
Yay! So you heard it here. Connect, collaborate, and offer beautiful and warm, amazing smiles through all of this craziness. So thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take good care.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much.